Once upon a time, in a small neighborhood, there lived a rather peculiar man. His name was Chris, but everyone called him Sandwich Chris because his biggest passion was making the most unique sandwiches and wandering around the neighborhood with them. Chris's sandwiches were so good that no one could compete with him in this art. One day, Chris woke up early in the morning and decided to make the most magnificent sandwich ever. He brought out all the ingredients he had at home: rustic bread, homemade cheese, pastrami, jam, pickles, chocolate sauce. "This sandwich will shock the neighborhood," he said to himself. With great care, he prepared the sandwich and placed it on a plate on the kitchen table. But just then, he noticed something. He was out of tea. Leaving the sandwich on the table, Chris rushed to the corner store to buy some tea. When he returned, he was met with a disaster. The sandwich was gone. Only an olive was left on the plate. "Who stole my masterpiece?" Chris shouted. Naturally, the whole neighborhood was up in arms. Chris started interrogating everyone in the neighborhood like a detective. First, he suspected Havus, the perpetually hungry cat. "Was it you, Havus?" he asked. Havus just licked its paws in response. Then he went to his neighbor, Mrs. Anna. Mrs. Anna replied, "Chris, I'm a vegan. What would I do with pastrami?" Finally, he reached David, one of the kids in the neighborhood. David, with a mischievous grin on his face, said, "I didn't do anything, but you might want to check the trash can." Chris bent down to look inside the trash can, and there it was, half of his sandwich. "Who threw this in the trash?" he shouted. Just then, old Mr. Bryan, who was strolling down the street, burst out laughing while clutching his belly. "Chris, I took that sandwich. I saw it on the table as I passed by your house, and I couldn't resist. But you put pickles and chocolate together in that sandwich. My stomach couldn't handle it, so I threw the rest away." Chris was stunned at first, but then burst into laughter. "I guess that recipe was a bit too bold," he said. The next day, the neighbors lined up to try a new, less experimental sandwich from Chris, and Chris vowed never to mix pickles and chocolate in the same sandwich again. And so, Sandwich Chris and his legendary sandwiches continued to be the talk of the neighborhood.